thanks very much to Ellen and Megan at Curlew Action, who really did a lot of the heavy lifting, getting this organised and up and running. As always, it's a team effort, and those guys have been great getting this up and running. And thanks very much, and welcome to Flo, who's going to be taking over from Ellen. And yeah, we wish you the best of luck in the coming months as you settle in. So this didn't take me more than about 2 minutes, because not a lot actually has changed in the UK perspective compared to last year, but there's been a lot of frenzied activity within specific Curlew projects around the UK and Ireland, which we're going to hear about tonight. But to reiterate, about 25% of the global breeding population of Eurasian Curlews in the UK, and that's roughly thought to be about 60,000 breeding pairs, but that was primarily based on data from the last atlas, which is now nearly 15 years old, and therefore I've added that disclaimer that these data are pretty much out of date, and if I was a betting man, I'd bet my house that the actual number is going to be significantly lower than that. And about 25,000 pairs in England, but ditto, again, I suspect the real number is probably going to be quite a bit lower than that. And we will have another bird atlas in the coming years that will hopefully constrain these figures a bit better, so we can see where we are. About 500 pairs exist south of the Pennine chain in sort of broadly the lowland part of England and Wales. That's pretty dire. The population's halved in the last couple of decades. That's also pretty dire. Encouragingly, curlews are quite long-lived birds. Anything upwards of 20 years is possible, even 30 years in extreme cases. And each year, the adult overwinter survival is pretty good. Based on work done by the BTO and others, it's up over 90%. So that gives us a bit of time to play with, which is key, because at the moment, generally the productivity is very poor. Nationally, it's around half of where it needs to be, which is about 0.5 chicks per pair per year. And it's not even half that, and it's much less than that in many areas. And Graham Appleton coined a statistic about 3 years ago, so this is probably needs updating as a figure, but he estimated that we need 10,000 more chicks per year in the UK just to halt the decline. So that's just to stay where we were 3 years ago. I suspect we need more chicks per year now to get back to where we were 3 years ago when he coined that statistic. So again, we talk about a lot of the issues and things, but we have to remember that figure, 10,000 more chicks per year. And there's a lot of interest in things like head starting and other initiatives, but that's not going to solve that. The only way we're going to solve that is landscape scale, national scale, and in some cases international scale solutions. So this year, I think we're all aware we had a very, very wet winter. We've had an extremely wet 18-month period from sort of the spring backwards, the wettest on record. That's had an impact on many curlew populations around the country, and we're going to hear about that tonight. And the old chestnuts of predation of various types is also coming out as a key theme in the stuff that I've seen so far. And I think one of the things tonight, where we've got 9 speakers spread across England and Northern Ireland, is each area is different. And so, it's very hard to put a one-size-fits-all picture, particularly when looking at different types of predators in different areas. And I think that's really, really important. Each area, the issues and the solutions are going to be almost unique to that area. There might be some general things that you can pull across the region or even across the countries, but it's those specifics at a local level that are really, really important. And so I'd urge everyone to bear that in mind tonight, that what you're hearing from one area may not be applicable to your area. Once you start deep diving and investigating what your local curlew population is doing, you inevitably find some googlies that are related to what's happening in your specific area. So that's all I was going to say. I'm really looking forward to hearing the roundup from our speakers this evening, and then having a good Q&A at the end. The first speaker, we're starting from broadly south to north. The first speaker is going to be John Avon, who's working down in the southwest in Dartmoor. And for all of the speakers, you've got 6 minutes. I'll give you one 1 minute warning when 5 minutes are up. And then as soon as you hear the quack, then please stop, because that means your 6 minutes are up.
6 minutes starting from now. Okay. Evening, everyone. A quick summary then of the Dartmoor Curlew recovery project. As you can see from that slide, we're in a 5-year project zone of recovery, of which this is year 4. There's a partnership of organisations involved, and we're very lucky to have a combination of remaining wild birds to try to help. And we've also got a 5-year head starting project funded by King Charles's Charitable Foundation and the Duchy of Cornwall. Now, I've been monitoring for 20 years on Dartmoor, and this year, 24, was another sort of disappointing year, really. Now, last year we had a very unusual weather pattern in the spring, which affected the curlew and delayed them. And this year we had something very similar with the, again, very wet conditions, which meant that the birds were very late coming back. Some arrived on time. Our general dates there, 20th of March to the 28th of March, was spot on. We had the 2 pairs return, which is the maximum we've had on Dartmoor for the last 10 years. 1 pair bred, we think. We didn't find the nest, but the female disappeared for 3 to 4 weeks, but then appeared again, unsuccessful, we think, at egg stage. Second pair came in. The female was 2 months late arriving this year. She was seen for about 12 days, and that was it, which is disappointing. But on Dartmoor now, we are having other sightings across the moor, and they were of single birds, which is the trend on Dartmoor, and I'll explain a little bit on the next few maps. May seems to be the time when they arrive, these late birds. But in summary, there were fewer birds this year in comparison to the previous year, and on a tetrad level, we were down from 23 tetrads to 17. On the head starting, 25 head starts were released by WWT in August. Now, there are 2 slides with maps here, just to show you the direction of travel, really, where we're going. The slide on the left showed the original curlew populations prior to 2004. 2005, you can see it was reduced to 3 sites. And then if you go fast forward to 23, the map on the right, the last 2 years, the pattern is showing this. So the breeding birds are still coming to the right-hand side, to what we call East Dartmoor Commons. Last year, we had a whole cluster of new birds in and around the central Dartmoor, which is the area we're looking at repopulating. And this year we didn't get the numbers come back to central Dartmoor, although we did get birds coming to the north of Dartmoor, which may coincide with peatland restoration. But basically, the number of tetrads now with curlew activity is more or less sort of gone up by 2/3 in the last 2 years, and that gives us some optimism that the birds are going to come back onto these old nesting sites, which we are managing. Obviously, with the head starting and the birds returning at 2, 3, 4-year-old and 5-year-old to breed, we're putting a lot of effort into habitat on previous nesting sites. And there's 2 examples of the sort of work we've been doing through scrape creation, re-wetting, and grazing and flailing to get the vegetation shorter is a key part of our habitat work. And also this year in 2024, we're rolling out other technology to record curlew, either through audio recorders on sites which we can't get to. Trail cameras are very important around nest sites, but also our head starting pen, and foxes particularly were picked up on the trail cameras. We're using satellite tags and radio tags on head starts to follow their post release monitoring. And as we go forward, as the birds are released, this is, as I say, 25 released this year by WWT, released in small groups so we could monitor them. The curlew were a month after release, all flying around quite healthily with their flags, and this monitoring gives us an idea of what sort of habitat they were choosing. We know from previous years that most birds go southwest, and that was followed up this year with a satellite tagged bird, which did Devon and Cornwall within a few weeks. And also through satellite tagging this year, we know that we had one bird that left Dartmoor and more or less did 30 odd hours all the way down to Spain, Portugal, and then back into Spain. So our birds this year have gone away to Spain, Portugal, Cornwall, and Devon. And basically now we are with the habitat in still being restored. When these birds come back, or next year, hopefully we'll have even more tetrads occupied, but time will tell. We need to believe what the Curlew tell us.
Thanks, John. Perfect timing. The quack has just gone.
Okay.
Dan Gornall. Dan, can you just unmute and confirm that you're here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Dan. Good, great. Over to you, Dan. Starting the timer now.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Dan Gornall, a research officer at WWT, and yeah, I'm going to be running through the Severn and Vale breeding season results. So for anyone unfamiliar, our study area sits within Gloucestershire and Worcestershire, and consists of lowland floodplain hay meadows that run alongside the river Severn and Avon. And to set the scene a little, we suffered from an unprecedented, prolonged period of flooding, which spanned from October 2023 right through until April 2024 this year. And yeah, this had a number of knock-on effects. So it left a lot of our traditional sites unoccupied this year due to lack of habitat. And yeah, as a result, we actually found curlew in a number of new areas, such as this nest here, which was our first ever arable nesting curlew pair. And yeah, the sites which were where flooded receded in time for nesting were still incredibly wet by the time the curlew started laying. So any additional rainfall put these nests at risk of flooding, and we lost a few nests at the start of the season because of this. So surveys at the start of the season showed there was 33 occupied territories this year, 2 of which were unattached males without a mate. Next, please. And of these, 23 pairs were confirmed to breed, and we monitored a total of 32 nesting attempts from these 23 pairs, 9 of which were relays. So of the 32 nests, 30 of these failed. That was 23 at egg stage and 7 at chick stage. And egg stage failures were due to 11 predation events, 8 abandonments, 1 nest which was trampled by cattle, and 3 which failed for unknown reasons. Of course, chick stage failures are harder to monitor, but we presume 6 of these broods were predated from radio tracking results, and 1 failed due to farm machinery. So that left just 2 remaining successful pairs, which fledged 1 chick each, giving a productivity of 0.05. So yeah, extremely poor year for us productivity wise. And just a quick note on nest fencing. So we fenced 10 nests this year, 5 of which hatched. So yeah, that was a 50% hatching success there versus 19% for unfenced nests. And some of the predators that were recorded on our nest cameras this year, we had 2 fox predations, 2 carrion crow, 4 raven, and 2 badger predations. And just to finish, so we had 3 headstock curlew breeding in the Severn and Vale this year, and this included 2 first-time breeders, which brings our overall total up to 6 headstock birds to breed within the Sav. And one of these new birds was a recruit from the Dartmoor headstocking project, as John has just talked about. And This bird was released there in 2022. Spent the following 2 winters on the Camel Estuary in Cornwall, and then recruited into the south this year, where it attempted to breed twice. Yeah, that's it from me. Happy to take any questions.
Grim but fascinating, and a lot of work has gone into that, and we're learning all the time, and each year is different. And yeah, seeing that flooding is quite sobering on top of all the other issues. We're next going to go northeast towards the Upper Thames area, and Mike Pollard is going to give us the review of that area. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Russ. Hope you can see that okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, I'm Mike Pollard. I coordinate the Curlew recovery project in the Upper Thames. Now in our 4th year, actually, since we've been going. We've been funded through Natural England's Species Recovery Programme, and this year we were part of the Curlew Solutions trial that's been running at a number of sites in England. And that's provided us with some extra resource, so I've got a bit more data to go through in summary just this evening. This shows our project area. So we operate across the Upper Thames and also in South Warwickshire, and we've got clusters of curlew populations really sort of scattered across there. As you can see in the middle there, we've got Otmoor, which has the largest population, and also a large population along the Thames. And on the right there, you can see the number of pairs that we recorded this year, and a nice increase at Otmoor that's been sustained over the last couple of years, and very similar numbers at our other sites to previous years. And in total, we recorded 71 pairs, and of which 66 of those were in the Upper Thames and 5 in South Warwickshire. Now, our curlews are nesting in 3 types of grassland habitats. We've got quite a few pairs nesting in ancient hay meadows, species-rich ancient hay meadows. A lot of these are in the floodplains themselves. But we've also got quite a few pairs nesting in improved agricultural grassland, some graze, some cut for hay and silage. And we've also got quite a few pairs nesting in lowland wet grassland, particularly in the Otmoor Basin. These are wet grasslands with scrapes and ditch features. And of course, a lot of our sites, like the Severn and Vales, are very prone to spring flooding, and that was very much the case this year. And quite a few nesting attempts were affected. So these are our results for the last 4 years in terms of both total numbers of pairs. This is for the for our patch in blue columns, and also the total number fledged, the orange columns. And you can see that each year the number of fledged does vary quite a bit. We have some good years and some bad years, and this year seems to be one of our less good years, with 12 chicks confirmed to have fledged from our total there. Each year we aim to fence at least 20 nests, and with the extra resources we've had this year, we've been able to fence more nests than we normally do, and achieved, I think the figure is 27, yes, 27, which was a fantastic effort, and that really does help us improve our productivity. And each year we are fencing more nests in each of our 3 sort of target fencing areas that you can see there. So a big thank you to everybody involved in making that happen, because this is all pretty much done by volunteers. With cameras on some nests, we did track some predators. We did catch a fox and a badger on camera, and these got through the fences. We thought we were pretty good at putting these fences up, and we generally get about 80 to 90% hatch success rate, but this year it was about more like 60%. So it was a bad year for us in terms of getting fence nests predated. But we did have some chicks fledge, and most excitingly, we had 1 pair raise 3 chicks to fledging, which is the first time I think anyone can remember that happening in the Upper Thames. And this was a pair that also fledged 2 chicks last year. And we were delighted that our farmer managed to capture some photographs on their drive, so going to and fro, and also one of our volunteers managed to capture some lovely pictures of the juveniles having a wash in the canal. This is a beautiful site next to the Oxford Canal with relatively low intensity sort of cattle farming, sheep farming, and working very closely with us for the last couple of years. It's been a great site for us.
1 minute, Mike, 1 minute.
Yeah, try and push the sides. We've had a couple of colour-ringed bird sightings as well. We've had one head-started bird from Slimbridge in 2019, that bred at Otmore. We've had one of Tony Cross's birds from Shropshire visit us. It was ringed last year, but visited us in the Cherwell Valley in July. That was a very unusual one for us. And we've also had another bird, if I can get the slide to move along. There we go. This bird was breeding in the Upper Thames, along the Thames there, but it had been actually ringed in the Severn estuary in 2013, hadn't been seen since 2015. So that's one that was a bit of a surprise, a very nice surprise. So quite a mixed picture. If you'd like to find out more about this year in the Upper Thames, we do have a public meeting coming up on the 21st of November. You'd be very welcome to join us if you live locally or fancy coming over. Just get in touch with me on the chat or use our email thamescurlews@gmail.com. And if you want to see the rest there, have a look at our film as well. And thanks to Natural England for funding the Curlew recovery project, and particularly the solutions trial work this year. Thanks, Russ.
Great.
Sorry about the hitches.
That's right. We got there. Thank you very much to you and the team from Upper Thames. Moving swiftly on, we're going to skirt west again, and we're going to go to the first of a couple of talks from Shropshire, which is a video that's been provided by Caleb Stradling.
My name's Caleb. I'm here to tell you about the Curlew country fieldwork results from the Curlew Solutions trial that took place in the Shropshire Hills this year. We're on the border with Wales. This is the whole AONB region, and just to give you an idea of the landscape, it's lots of grassland, pastoral farmland with some moorland up on the hills. Our survey results found 42 territories, quite high densities in some places, down in the valleys especially, the little hotspots, and of those we found 17 nests were found. Only one of those was unfenced because they got predated before it could be fenced. 4 nests were predated, 2 by crow, 2 by badger, we think, but we didn't get the cameras out early enough. Another 5 were abandoned. We had a fox breach the fence here and disturb birds off the nest and not predate any eggs. And then we had 8 broods that hatched in the end, and only 16 chicks of those 8 broods, so quite a low hatch rate per nest as well. So this is how it all played out in time. We had the first nest we found actually survived the longest, and the last nest we found survived the shortest period of time, with quite a lot of the late nests failing quite early or being abandoned. All of the broods tended to seem to die off around the same kind of time, which may point to a weather effect, because we had quite a lot of heavy rain up until mid-June, and then all of a sudden clear skies and probably more predators flying around, and definitely more farming activity. So this is how they all did it across habitats. Most of the failures from predation were in grazeland or hay crops, unusually. Quite a few abandonments. I had 2 abandonments in silage, and that one that did hatch in silage only hatched 1 chick. But yeah, quite good productivity in the haylage type habitats, which I guess you could compile with the hay, and semi-improved pasture and rough pasture actually did quite well as well, in terms of producing chicks, relatively speaking. We monitored the chicks after they hatched, kept visiting them every day, and saw how they got on in their different habitats. We found the silage nesters died on day 5, although they only had 1 chick, so we have to factor that into our calculations, but that's a very hostile environment, so we weren't surprised at that. And the 2 that hatched in haylage also both died in the second week, we don't think that they could have gotten out of their very tall, dense hay meadow, and just wasn't enough short grass within range for them to make it there. And then you can see that by Brood D, with a bit more grazed land and a bit more of a mosaic habitat available, they were doing better, and that plays out into the next 4 broods as well, where they all were pretty much in grazed land, with the exception of Brood G, who started in a hay meadow, which is a less dense hay meadow, and managed to make their way out of it. And then Brood H, which survived the longest, and they were in a rotationally grazed with cattle field where the nest was protected and fenced from. They were left a little sward around the fence area to give them a bit of cover and stuff, and they did very well. When Curlew Country did their wild nest monitoring back in 2015, 2016, they found similar results. Basically, no chicks fledged from 31 nests over those 2 years, and no chicks fledged from 16 nests this year. So pretty much similar situation, and although the breeding territory numbers have stayed pretty stable, the chicks are still not fledging. But yeah, I just wanted to finish on some good news from Curlew Country about head starting. This is UJ, who's a head started bird from 2019, who's come back, and this is his 3rd breeding record for Shropshire. And this year his chicks got to 3 weeks old, which is a good deal better than a lot of the wild birds in Shropshire. So that's encouraging news, as well as another couple of sightings that we've had this year. A new bird come back and bred just below the Cyperstones and from 2021, and another bird from 2022 who has appeared in the pre-migratory flock after being spotted in Wiltshire earlier this year, but hopefully they will come back to breed very soon. Yeah, so if you have any questions, contact me on the below. And yeah, take care. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm not sure if Caleb's here this evening, but he is. Many thanks to you and the Curlew Country team for that update. I mean, one of the things that struck me at the Curlew Forum meeting early this year, which reviewed the 2023 breeding season, was that certainly in lowland southern England, it looked like there were more head-started chicks being released than actually naturally fledged chicks, which is quite a sobering statistic. And you can view that either as encouraging or alarming, but that's the stats, is that we're probably now generating more head-started chicks than we are naturally fledged chicks in the south. And I think the presentations that we've heard just now are really emphasising the issues in that area. We are going to spring north into higher country, and next up is Paul Noyes of BTO, and Paul's going to be talking about the work that he's been doing in the Yorkshire Dales.
Thanks, Russ. Yes, so slowly making our way up the country now. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Noyes. I work for the British Trust for Ornithology as the WADA project officer. I've worked for a few years now in the Yorkshire Dales and on a couple of different projects. So just going to give you a quick update from 2024. So just to give you a little bit of a flavour of the types of the diversity of habitats we have in the Dales, our project area is generally centred around Wensleydale, but there's a few different areas spread out around the national park. We have a varied set of habitats, grassland habitats, going from the rough permanent pasture on the left, as I've got here, the silage meadow in the middle, and then hay meadow on the right there. And I put the dates of which the photos were taken and indication of the age of the nests on each of the photos as well, just to give you a kind of idea of just, the different opportunities and challenges faced by the curlew in these different habitats as well. So it's quite, like I say, quite drastically different, but yeah. So in terms of our monitoring, we found and monitored 30 nests on active farmland using nest cameras, temperature loggers, and visits every 7 to 10 days, and visits around estimated hatch dates. This was part of the project that Mike and Caleb have alluded to as well. So this Natural England Species Recovery Programme project coordinated by the Curlew Recovery Partnership. We also had volunteer surveys on each of the sites, and where landowners allowed and it was logistically feasible, we also temporary electric fenced nests as well. So we had 8 nests fenced this year, and we also had, thanks to Farming and Protected Landscapes funding, 13 adults GPS tagged as well. So on half of our sites, we relied on the volunteer surveys using these 5-visit surveys to estimate productivity using crude indices, but on half of our sites, we used more intensive twice-weekly visits to relocate broods and pairs. Ideally trying to find chicks on the ground and broods, as you might be able to make out from the grainy digiscoping attempts there. But if we couldn't relocate broods, then we just relied on adult behavior as well. And again, with the brood monitoring, the 13 GPS tagged adults also helped. So in terms of the outcomes, 73% of the nests hatched, obviously much higher hatch rate than some of the sites we've had tonight. We also had quite a lot of abandonment. That does seem to be an issue this year. And we had 5 nests abandoned in general. One nest failed to hatch. It was the eggs were infertile after being sent to Sheffield University for analysis. We actually only had 2 nests predated this year, one by a stoat and one was unknown. So looking at the fenced nests and the unfenced nests, of the 8 fenced nests, all of them hatched, so 100% hatch success there. And then out of the 22 unfenced nests, it was a 64% hatch rate, which initially looks quite stark in comparison. But if you look at the kind of causes of nest failure within those 22 nests, stoat predation, obviously the electric fences probably wouldn't have mitigated against that, and the infertility, and then even the abandonment. These were 3 of the 5 nests abandoned were in the silage fields, which are shut up and left alone for the period of the nesting generally. So you'd be hard pushed to say that nest fencing could have mitigated against that as well. So lots of things to tease out with the full analyses, but that's the first impressions. So in terms of the sites where we did a bit more intensive brood monitoring, we had 15 nests in these areas, with 10 of which hatched, and then we had 7 with confirmed or probable fledged chicks, and 3 likely failed. But as we've heard from other talks, very few broods had more than 1 chick fledged. So we did have 1 brood of 2 confirmed fledged, but the rest just had 1 chick. So 8 chicks overall from that initial 15 nests, coming to the 0.53 chicks per nest, which for a stable population per nest rather than per pair, it's 0.43 for a stable population. So still stable, but I think just as everyone else has kind of alluded to with this, birds were really delayed on our study sites with the cold and wet spring. We didn't have the flooding, but they were still put off getting eggs on the ground. And then we also had another period right at the peak patching period where most of our chicks had just hatched. We had about 3 solid days of rain and cold weather, which really didn't help things. So yeah, it might sound a lot better compared to some of the figures we've had tonight, but that's, I think, on the whole, a bit of a disappointing year. This is also important to mention that these sites were the sites where we had the most intensive lethal predator control as well. So our other study sites, the productivity was likely much less. So yeah, so mixed year, I would say, but obviously still lots of positives to be taken from it. I'll wrap up just to quickly say thank you to all our partners. And again, as others have mentioned, the Natural England Species Recovery Programme project coordinated by the Curlew Recovery Partnership, but also the Farming in Protected Landscapes funding via the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, who also partner with us on this project, the Bolton Estate, which are partners on this project as well. And thanks to Rich Bunce as well for the lovely photos in the slides. So I'll leave it with that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Paul. You win the prize for closest to time so far, so well done for that. And yeah, in a tough year, I think overall that could still be viewed as an encouraging result. There's been a lot against the birds this year. We're going to move across to Nidderdale, and Matt Trevelyan is going to give an overview from there. And thanks to Matt as well for providing some additional feedback from other landowners and farmers that he's been engaging with in the area. It's been really interesting hearing, even just within that area, some of the variability.
Yeah, I'm representing 2 Nidderdale Curlew projects, the Darley Beck Curlew project and the Hartwith Curlew project. So hopefully you can see where Nidderdale is, right in the centre of the north of England. And our 2 projects are those 2 little dots on the sort of map, the red one, Darley, and Hartwith, the yellow one, both quite close to each other. They're grassland projects working with farmers and volunteers Yeah, both have got a shared payment trial. I just thought I'd pop that up just because it's a sort of geeky thing that we like to talk about. So we were paying farmers, we offered them £350 per nest fence and £200 per hectare. But the news was really that farmers took advantage of the nest fence payment on occasion, but that tended to mean that they didn't take advantage of the hectareage payment, which obviously compromised chances for chicks. I'm going to start with the Darley Beck project results. That's an area of approximately 400 hectares, though it does sort of vary a little bit every year, and but it gives you an idea of the density of birds in our area. So I should say quick thanks to Clive White and Kate Wright. I know Kate's online. I've stolen slides from them, so thank you very much, Kate and Clive. This was one of Clive's slides. Our best laid intentions to withdraw livestock and have everything ready, but the bad weather basically scuppered plans a little bit. It delayed access to the fields, delayed access for early grazing, and Curlews also delayed their nesting by approximately 10 days, pushing everything a little bit into the silage making season. And also altering the Curlew's choice of nest fields. We try and manipulate the Curlews into going into the best fields in Nidderdale with some success, but not always. And this made it harder. Yeah, you can see the number of territories over 400 hectares area. So the number of territories unfortunately went down this year. It appears that a number of pairs of curlew failed to return to the area. We don't obviously know quite why, but we suspect possibly it's old age, that they're simply too old. So we had less pairs arriving back in Darley Beck project. You can see on that territories with successful first nests, we had 11, territories with successful second nests, 3, and then some which didn't attempt a second nest, another 3. And nest fencing. So this was actually something new for Darley Beck. We were inspired by Hartwith's success with nest fences, and we used nest fences largely for livestock in Darley. We hadn't had a huge issue with egg predation in previous years, but we had issues with disturbance from livestock. So, and one of the ways we use nest fences is we erect them, and then once the curlew is sitting tight with a nest fence around it, the farmer can fill the field up with more livestock. So it allows more flexibility for the farmer, which, yeah, that was the idea. And successfully fenced nests, not as many as we'd perhaps hoped, but 9, and some nests failed, were difficult to find, or were too late to be nest fenced. The eggs had already been predated. So there was we're very realistic about fledging rates in Darley, but very pessimistic. So we know this many broods produced, and we know for certain this many chicks fledged, but it might have been a few more. There's a very good, Kate did this excellent waterfall diagram which shows the nest attempts at the start, one which was displaced, then eggs that were hatched, 19 farming operations responsible for losing 2 clutches, then predation for losing 3, and then human disturbance was quite an issue in one side, and led to the 1 clutch going. And then so we had quite high brood hatching rates thanks to the nest fencing partly, and but then further broods were lost due to farming operations, predation, and then an unknown loss. But we think at least 6 fledged chicks, and we're also quite strict on what we mean by fledging in Darley. They really have to be flying away. There you go, there 73 eggs laid, 21 eggs lost, 52 chicks hatched, and 6 chicks fledged.
1 minute, Matt. 1 minute.
Oh goodness me! Right, I better get to the Hartwith project. So Hartwith project is a little bit smaller. It's approximately 300 hectares. It's a little bit higher up the hill, and yeah, has a similar approach with nest fencing, but not very demanding on the farmers, I might say. They tend to put a nest fence up and then rely on goodwill of farmers. Yeah, 2023 had been a good year, but this year fledging rates were down. So yeah, we had 8, estimated 11 chicks last year, and unfortunately this year was a poor year. Although it had good farmer engagement, there was some positives, but only 2 to 4 fledged chicks, and I haven't had a lot of data. They've yet to have their end of season meeting to really feed back properly, but they blamed it on crows partly. I should say that both projects had some predator control. Darley had paid for predator control, and that there seemed to be less predators around this year, and we did get more chicks. So yeah, we think it was useful, but it's very hard to say evidence to provide clear evidence. Thanks, Russ.
That's 6 minutes, Matt.
Cheers.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks to you and Clive, Kate, and the rest of the team for that update from Nidderdale. We are going to shift across to Susannah Bleakley at South Lakes.
So we're a volunteer-led group. We're an independent registered charity, and many of our volunteers are ultra-local, and by that I mean that they can hear and in some cases see the birds from their homes. We had a good year with 18 or 20 chicks fledged from the 24 pairs that we monitored, which is significantly up from just 4 or possibly 5 in the previous year. We're relatively new, and 2023 was the first year we threw everything we could at the task. In previous years, we just fenced a small number of nests located and fenced, but in spite of our best efforts at monitoring, we think that only 1 chick fledged in each of the years 21 and 22. So 4 or 5 in 23 was a big step up, but not enough for a stable population. And the 18 or 20 that fledged this year, a big improvement. For the birds that we count as fledged, our field workers are visiting every family every day, and this year most of the fledged juvenile birds were seen flying, and we've worked really hard this year to improve every single aspect of our work. So this success is due to lots of small improvements in lots of areas. We've looked closely at every possible step to improve. It was the first year this year that we had resources, that we had field workers, paid field workers. It was a one-off funded by Farming in Protected Landscapes. We lost 5 nests last year after we'd found them, but before we fenced them, which we were planning to fence at full clutch. So now we fence the same day as we find, but we keep the nest camera 5 to 10 metres away from the nest for the first week. Every year, better knowledge, building on what we know from previous years, it helps to narrow down our search area for nests, and we're building on previous farmer relationships too. We've taken a nest by nest sort of action plan approach to really target crow control. The field workers out in the field are actively looking for signs of predator presence, scat, or evidence of land predation. We've used thermals at night, and we've combined all of this intelligence to better coordinate with those who are. And we are continually building relationships and awareness amongst farmers and the public, and this is helping. So we're monitoring every family every day. We're mitigating issues. Mowing was delayed, disturbance was minimized, lost families were found by helpers. We had a couple of near miracles. All the farmers have been amazing, keen Curlew sponsors. So the headlines: 20 nests were found and fenced, 4 additional families were located and the broods monitored. Altogether 57 chicks hatched. The night of 22-23 May, there was a terrific intense downpour. Our first nest actually hatched the next morning, and 10 more, so 11 in total, hatched in the days immediately after the storm. When we looked at the thermal log data from the nests and the information of egg analysis from Sheffield, it looks like we lost 3 nests to that storm. However, we won those 11 families had hatched immediately before the storm, would the chicks have survived? It may be unfortunate timing for the storm to come before and not after hatching. Many of our nests are close to settlements, near small towns and villages. A particular horror this year was a message on the field workers' WhatsApp. Cat found with chick 106 headed to the cricket club. We doubt that chick 106 made it, and it's very, very sad to a cat. I just want to explain a little bit about habitat, because we're not strictly comparing like to like when we show improved fledging success. In 2023, more of our found nests were in the silage fields in the ryegrass-dominated Lythe Valley. But spring 24, we had ideal growing conditions. The grass grew really fast, and we struggled to find all the nests in the Lythe Valley. But we found more nests outside of the Lythe, and these were in other habitats, in meadow and in rough pasture. So we're not really strictly comparing like with like. And if we can find the funding, we want to try thermal drones for nest finding in silage again next year. Just turning to hatching success, we had better hatching rates in 2024. Or put it another way, we had really poor hatching success in 23, and this we attribute to the very dry weather in 23, making the shells harder, and this corroborated by Sheffield's analysis, so that in 2023 many of those eggs failed at the hatching stage.
1 minute, Susannah, 1 minute.
That's fine. In summary, we're encouraged by 18 fledged chicks in 2024. We have shown that in our location, curlews can breed in farmland if you have great support from the farmers, from the funders, and great volunteers. Now we really want to make this sustainable. It's hugely important to us, because if we can't, with all the resource that we're throwing at them and all the people here who care, then curlew as a breeding bird are going to be restricted to grouse moors and nature reserves. This year, we've proven that with loads of resources and with really good relations, it is possible. And our heartfelt thanks go to all of those who've made this possible, most especially farmers who have all been amazingly good curlew supporters. There's a link there to our socials. If you want to join us and look at some of the data from the thermal loggers around the storm or anything else, we're really keen to hear from people. Thank you.
Great, Susannah, thank you very much, and good to hear some encouraging news. And I like the those of you that are into cycling will recognise the Dave Brailsford marginal gains approach being applied a la Team Sky in the South Lakes. So so well done. We're now going to move across a bit of sea to Northern Ireland, and we're going to hear an update from Katie Gibb, who's been working there for the last few years, and I think this is her last year working there before she moves on. So looking forward to hearing Katie's update. Katie, over to you.
Thanks, Russ. Yeah, this is definitely my last year. All right, yeah, so thanks so much for having a little bit of Northern Irish flavour into your update. So I'm going to give a really quick rundown of the 3 sites that we have here in Northern Ireland. And I just wanted to briefly explain the differences between them, because it's quite, it's not a small country by any means, so very different habitat types. So firstly, we have our Lower Loch Earn Island Reserve. So this is 200 hectares of lowland wet grassland. This is over 12 islands and 1 mainland site that are all managed for breeding waders. The drumlin-shaped islands, which means surveying is very difficult. All nest and productivity monitoring is undertaken by boat. So I've done it once with Amy, our manager down there, and I wouldn't recommend it. We also have the Upper Loch Earn Advisory landscape. So this is about 1,000 hectares of wet lowland grassland, fen meadow, rushy pasture, and farmed with beef and suckler or dairy. And they work with about 60 farmers. And then we have, very unbiasedly, the best site of Northern Ireland. So this is our upland site, so Glenwarry or the Antrim Plateau. It's 15,000 hectares mosaic habitat, ranging from blanket bog, heath to species-rich grassland, and semi and agriculturally improved grassland. And we work with just over 100 farmers in that landscape. So the Lower Loch Earn Island Reserve had the most successful year of the Curlew Life project. So that's the last 4 years that have been running here in Northern Ireland and a few other sites, RSPB sites across the water. So they got a minimum of 20 fledglings with a potential of 36 fledglings. So as I was saying, those drumline islands are really hard to get proper counts on. So breeding densities make it also very difficult to do broods. As you can see, their highest brood density on Rosscore Island is 1 curlew pair per hectare, so it makes it quite difficult. They had a decrease from last year with their hatching success, but they do amazing predator control and they have really high natural hatching rate, so they don't have to do any nest protection fences. The other really amazing news that they had out, which you probably all saw, was Trustee Island. So this was a recreation of five hectares of lowland wet meadow through the Loch Earn Landscape Partnership Project. And they're the first to fledge curlew, to fledge young on the island in living memory. And now the island supports 19 pairs of breeding waders. So absolutely amazing. You can see there that there's a photo of a dead chick. Sorry about that, but they have been, they didn't do any radio tagging, but 2 chicks were found very late. So that's quite an old chick there, as you can see. They think it might be due to tick burden or exposure. So we've also, like listening to all the other sites, we've also had a very wet, cold winter, spring and summer. And that's one of the things they saw there was an increase in fledgling age. So from early 30s to about mid 40s and up. So days until they fledge. So really interesting. I'm not going to talk too much about the Upper Loch Earn advisory landscape. They've done a huge amount of habitat work over the last few years. A huge conifer got brought down in key curlew breeding area. Unfortunately, they're still seeing quite a decline and they haven't had any evidence of any fledglings at all in the last couple of years. But they have seen, with all their habitat work and their predator control, they have seen an increase, a really incredible increase in lapwing and redshank. So there's hope that maybe it just might be taking a little bit longer for the curlew to respond. And then we have Glenmurray. So I think last year when I presented this, I was saying that hopefully in the next couple of years, we will really start to see an increase in population with all the fledgling success that we'd had. So in 1 year, we got an increase of 40%. So from 37 pairs to 52. And that is the highest pair count that Glenmurray has seen since the 90s. So an absolute amazing result. I would say
1 minute, Katie, 1 minute.
Okay. About 20% of 25% of those we were estimating to be juveniles. So they caused absolute havoc for us, which was lots of fun. They didn't actually breed, so we're thinking it takes to about 3 or 4 years for them to breed. You can see there we got a good amount of nests located and fenced. Our hatch rate inside the fences were pretty good, and as always, pretty low outside of fences. Of 25 broods that we made it to fledge, so we monitored 30 and we got 50 chicks. So across the 52 pairs, that's about a 0.98 productivity rate, so still pretty good, the lowest we've seen in a long time, but I can't complain. We also had a huge shift in fledgling age, so from early 30s up to late 40s, so a huge amount of time that they had to be on the ground, and we put this down to temperature and late insects. We also got the colouring project up and going, which is really exciting for Northern Ireland. And then we did a trial with the nest detection dogs, which needs probably another year just to work out a few kinks, but we showed that there was no evidence in disturbance rate. And then we had the end of the Curlew Life project. So over the 4 years, we got 202 fledglings out. So absolutely amazing milestone for us to have reached. And I just wanted to end on this, just showing that we've been on the ground up in Glenmurray since 2002, and it has taken us a very long time to get where we're getting. So keep up the really good work, everyone, and it takes a while to get there, but sometimes it works. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, Katie. That's great. Good positive news. Right, thanks, Katie. Right, moving on to Leo Smith. This is one that we've just reshuffled in the programme. And Leo's going to talk about his area in Shropshire. Leo, over to you.
Thank you. We've got two projects that we're doing through Shropshire Ornithological Society. One is monitoring most of the curlew population in the county through community wildlife groups, and I'll explain more about that later. We're also organising a nest protection and chick monitoring scheme to establish the reason for low chick survival rates, because that's the real problem. People fence nests, but if the chicks don't go on to fledge, that doesn't do much good. We've got 10 community wildlife group areas, and so far we've been working in 5 of them. We started off with 2 in 2018, added a third in 2022, and then we added the area around Oxfordshire in the northwest in 2023, which is 2 areas. What we've been doing is finding and fencing all the nests we can, and then radio tagging and tracking the chicks. This is the summary of the results in 2024. We found 13 nests altogether. Some of those were relays. 9 of them were fenced. Only 4 of those nests produced any chicks. 10 chicks hatched. We radio tagged 11 of them, and we had no fledged young from those 11 radio tag chicks at all. The second table summarises the results we've had since 2024, and altogether we've radio tagged 75 chicks, and only 7 to 8 of those have gone on to fledge. So the fledging rate, even for protected nests, is less than 10%. None have been lost to agricultural activities. Almost all have been predated. The vast majority of chicks don't survive for as long as 10 days, and fox is the main predator. And in one of the areas that we've been working on, for 4 years, we've had no fledged young at all, either from the fencing nest programme or from separate monitoring from the community wildlife groups. These are the areas that we're covering. That's a county map of Shropshire. The River Severn starts in the bottom right-hand corner and wanders off north west. The 2 grey areas are the main towns of Shrewsbury and Telford. The red dots are the distribution map from the Bird Atlas map between 2008 and 13, and the blue rectangles are the areas of the community wildlife group areas. You can look on the report on the website or on the SOS website for more information about that. The groups collectively monitor about, at the moment, about 90 pairs altogether, which is probably 80 to 90% of the county population. The scattered dots outside the community wildlife group areas, we know they've largely disappeared in the last 14 years. The 2024 analysis is incomplete, but I've only had information that 3 chicks might possibly have fledged out of those 90 pairs that are being monitored. Shropshire's got about 20% of the total curlew population in southern England. The IUCN conservation criteria cover protection of range as well as population. So in that sense, the Shropshire population is both regionally and nationally important. But you can see from the graph, from starting from the population from the Bird Atlas in 2010, that we've got a steady decline, with a forecast local extinction date of 2048.
Leo,
So
1 minute.
okay,
minute.
right. So if predations had always been at this level, curlews would have been extinct many years ago. So what's changed recently to increase predator pressure? And we think this is the answer. Fox predation has increased because they're fed, and so the birds of prey are fed by the pheasants are distributing. Shropshire's got some of the highest pheasant release densities in the country, and we think the figure for annual release in 2018 alone was over 2 million. So you can't put that amount of meat out for meat eaters without the population benefiting.
Okay, 6 minutes. 6 minutes.
Yeah, the information can be found on the SOS website or on the Curlew Action website, or for further information, I'd be pleased to answer emails.
Great. Thank you very much to Leo and to all of the team working in Shropshire. Right, so if you haven't put a question in the chat yet and you want to, now is the time to do so. We're going to move into a Q&A. Many thanks to all the speakers, but also really importantly, many thanks to all of the folk who are both paid and unpaid, particularly the volunteers that have underpinned much of the work that we've heard about this evening. It really is a community effort. Just before we go into questions, a reminder that we have the European breeding season webinar, again hosted by Curlew Action, on the 13th of November, details on our website. And we're hosting an online European head starting workshop on the 6th and 7th of February next year. Again, details on the website. And also keep an eye on our blog. I know Mary's put one up very recently with a perspective on curlew conservation. And I think we're going to be putting up some of the summary from the talks this evening onto the Curlew Action blog as well. So, first one is a comment more than a question. If you haven't seen the chat yet, interesting to hear that 8 pairs of curlew found on Bodmin Moor this year, but no chicks fledged. But there's some good chat going around, getting some more monitoring done of that population down in the far southwest. We've heard a lot about flooding, and it was very obvious in our river valley sites like the Severn, Avon, Vales and the Thames that it had a big impact this year. One of the questions was, is there any emergency action that can be taken during flooding events, presumably in the context of trying to save curlews that have already started nesting? I don't know whether, Dan, if you're still on, if you want to provide a comment on that, you're probably well placed to comment on that question.
Yeah, I mean, the only immediate thing that comes to mind is potentially taking head start on the eggs if you can get there fast enough after the flooding event. And yeah, that's something we're considering in the Severn, Avon, Vale. I did post in the chat earlier, we applied for a license to do so last year, but it wasn't granted in time. But it's something we're looking to do in 2025 season.
Great, thanks, Dan. There's quite a lot of chat about head starting and the merits of head starting when birds are recruiting into areas or being released into areas where the productivity is still very low. Cognizant of some of the things that we've heard this evening about the time it takes sometimes to see a turnaround in success. You know, we've heard a bit about the sort of marginal gains approach in South Lakes, the work that's been done in Northern Ireland that Katie was talking about. Equally, we've also heard about some areas where people have been stoically working away for quite a long time now and not really making much dent in productivity. So I'd be interested to hear from, I guess, those involved in head starting really about what's the sort of time scales that we're thinking about across which success can be judged. Obviously, you know, there's some head starting projects where birds have been released for 3 or 4 years now. In the areas where they're being released, if there hasn't been an upturn in fortune, but some of those birds have been recruited into other sites, but even there the fledging is pretty low. At what point do we say it's not really working and we need to try something else? Is there anyone that's involved in head starting directly that wants to comment on that? I know it's quite a difficult issue.
I'd say that we've got a head starting project in Shropshire which has been going since 2017. It's slowed the decline in the area it's working in, but it hasn't produced an upturn in productivity. And that area is included in my forecast of disappearance by 2048.
Okay. Thanks, Leo. And Caleb's also added, my opinion on head starting in Shropshire, the landscape changes to improve breeding success in Curlew will take many years to take effect. Our aim is to stop them going locally extinct in the time it takes while agro-environment and other habitat creation work takes place. Curlew country is not in a position to be able to buy up lots of land to keep the Curlews, so all we can do is lobby for these changes, which we do behind the scenes. And it's worth saying that Curlew Country is a partner in the Curlew Recovery Partnership, as is Curlew Action and many others. And a lot of the work done behind the scenes by that organisation is about the slow grind of trying to influence policy, which, as you can imagine, with the change of administration recently, has been extremely challenging. I don't think we've had a huge amount of success in influencing policy for the benefit of Curlews so far. But let's see how we get on with the new administration in the coming years. So there's been a couple of comments about, one was around radio tracking and whether it has an impact on chick survival. Another one that Mike Smart's mentioned about very regular monitoring of nests, in some cases daily, and whether there's a risk of disturbance. I guess for those involved in radio tracking, anyone want to comment on that? Has there been any studies done looking at radio tracking specifically as a technique, and whether it has any impact on Curlew or equivalent size waders? I don't know the answer, which is why I'm asking. If not, put it in the chat. And again, I'd likewise be interested and maybe put it in the chat if you know whether there's any evidence to show whether quite intensive monitoring, daily monitoring, can potentially have an impact on nest success. There's one here that's just come in, which I will take, which is any evidence that allowing cattle or sheep into fields that have fenced nests help distract predators from the nest. So any evidence that cattle or sheep coming into fields where there are fenced nests help distract predators from the nest. Susannah, is that anything that you've looked at in your area?
I just wanted to pick up the comment. I think I may have been misunderstood. We did not visit every nest every day. We visited the chicks. We looked at every family. So we weren't visiting nests to monitor them. We were using nest cameras as monitoring. And it was only once they were at chick stage that we did daily visits, and obviously very, very conscious of disturbance, and kept from a safe distance, viewed from distant viewpoints, and monitored very sensitively. I completely agree. We think we lost at least one nest because there was disturbance, there was roadworks going on beside the nest, and I think eventually that sort of daily disturbance was just too much for them.
Thanks, Susannah. Nigel Jarrett's just offered to provide a response on the question about head starting and is it working. So Nigel, if you can hear us, please fire away.
Hi, Russell, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't know for sure, is it working or not? Graham Appleton's already mentioned what Godward head starting's done for a population that recruits to pretty much the same fields from which they were, or in which they were released. What we know from the 2019 releases at Slimbridge is that birds do survive and they do come back to recruit to become breeders, those of which we can find, but not necessarily into the same areas. And I just want to pick up something that Mandy said earlier. Is it fair to release birds in places that have heavy fox predation? So what I'm hearing tonight is we've got the agricultural management sorted, but it's the ground and aerial predators that finish them off before they get beyond 10 to 14 days. So it'll work if we get everything on the ground right, but is it not clear to everybody that birds don't have a chance when they're up against predators like foxes, other protected species, and places like badgers, and then birds of prey? So yes, it can work, but we shouldn't necessarily expect the birds to recruit into the places that we release them in. That's the evidence so far from our Severn and Avon Vale releases. It's what started at Slimbridge. Birds at Dartmoor that have been released this year are surviving, as best we know, well. You know, they've migrated to Spain and Portugal, and some are still in the Southwest Peninsula. We can't track all the birds, but whether they come back to breed on Dartmoor, which doesn't have any other curlews to attract them, you know, Mandy also made the point about is it fair to release them when there are other curlews? My thinking is, from what I hear and what I read, that yeah, curlews and other birds do need one another to form like a collaborative to see off predators. So that's something that we should examine. Where should we, if we're going to head start, where do we head start? Probably we should use it to bolster populations that are already there at present until we can sort out the bigger issues. So question was, is head starting working? I think it can work if we get everything else right, but it's always been acknowledged by us at WWT as a way of bolstering recruitment. It doesn't sort out the bigger issue or issues. That's it, Russell.
Thanks, Nigel.
A lot. Yeah.
And I go back to my comment that certainly in the south, if we didn't have all the head started chicks coming into that landscape, the number of naturally fledged chicks would be extremely low. Extremely low. One comment I was going to make. So I think Dan made a point about, and I'll ask this as a question and then make a comment. So I'd be interested to know, Dan, you mentioned 8 nests were abandoned, and that's quite a high number for the total number of nests that you've got. I'd be interested to know what you thought the cause of abandonment was, whether it was floodwater or something else. And then I think you made a comment about presumed predated, and certainly, you know, work done by GWCT and others with radio tracking, you know, intensively is showing that the assumptions that we make about those chicks disappearing being due to predation are not always valid. And here in the New Forest, the work hasn't been published yet, but from what I've heard, I'm aware that, you know, quite a lot of chicks have just been found dead, not apparently predated. Some of them have got high tick loads, some of them haven't, potentially starvation or some other factor. So I think as we do more radio tracking studies in different areas, it'll be very interesting to see whether the assumptions that we're making about the bulk of those chicks disappearing because of predation actually hold out or not. Because my understanding from here in the New Forest is that's not necessarily the case. And there's it's a bit like whack-a-mole. You think you solve one problem or you think you understand a problem, and then suddenly you find there's other things coming up. And I can't remember who it was, but someone else mentioned tick load this evening as well. And I think that's something that may come to the fore together with fertility of an ageing population of birds as well. But Dan, do you want to make any comment on that high level of abandonment that you had this year?
Yeah, sure. It is a bit of a recurring theme, to be honest, in the Severn Avon Vale, which is partly the reason we looked into getting a licence from Natural England for potential head starting of these abandoned nests. Flooding's the main cause for sure. But certainly more than half of those 8 that were abandoned, that was due to flooding earlier in the season. And then, yeah, the remainder, just a couple of odd occurrences actually, where birds would incubate for weeks, and then suddenly the nest was just abandoned. And in the past we've looked at log of data for these nests, and it reveals just one bird incubating and nights with no adults on the nest at all. So a couple of strange abandonments for sure, but yeah, I would say flooding's the number one cause, definitely.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. It's worth saying that Curlew Action, we're planning to host a webinar over the winter series that will focus on the whole predation issue. It's a very big one. There's a lot of discussion in the chat about it at the moment. I think it's also worth saying that the Curlew recovery position has always been very clear that it has to be part of a suite of measures included within agri-environment for curlew conservation to be really effective in most areas, I suspect. And that's something that, again, we've pushed on that through the Curlew Recovery Partnership, and it's hit the policy blocker, in some cases at an extremely high level in government. So it's not that the community that is working together through the Curlew Recovery Partnership isn't trying to get these measures in place. It's just that it's being hit by various policy blockers and has been. But it's something that we're going to keep pushing on, and you know, I understand it's an important issue. And I welcome a lot of the robust discussion that's going on in the chat around that topic. Right, I'm just going to check. So I'm going to finish off with this one because we're nearly up to time, but it's a really interesting one from Keith. I think it was Keith. No, Simon Higgs. Has anyone compared the amount of insect food in areas where chicks survive to areas where they don't? So that is a piece of work that I think we would really like to see. There was a PhD by someone who I think is now, was it Leah Kelly in the Peak District, that I think may have looked at invertebrate availability for chicks. Someone maybe put it in the chat if they can remember. I think it was Leah Kelly. She's now RSPB and she did a PhD, and I think it was in the Peak District that started looking at this. In a lowland context, I think one of the things we found locally here where I'm based in the New Forest is that a lot of the ponds and valley mires, which are used by curlews for feeding, they are experiencing very high levels of recreation activity, including dog walking, and dogs going into those static and slow moving water bodies are shedding chemicals from their flea treatments into the water. And we did some pilot measurements last year, and some of those are at levels which would be toxic to aquatic invertebrates, so larvae of the kinds of winged insects that curlew chicks are going to be eating. So it's quite possible that in some landscapes the level of insecticide in the water bodies is actually reducing the availability of invertebrate prey, particularly areas with high recreational access, particularly dogs. So this was something we hadn't even thought about 10 years ago, and in the New Forest it may be a bit of a smoking gun, and we're going to do some work on invertebrate load in recreationally high and low use areas to try and test that. So I think as we do more work and the technology starts yielding results like the radio tracking, it just opens up more questions, and it will lead to more lines of research until we finally bottom it out. But I think overall we can see from tonight that habitat's important, but predation is probably even more important at the minute, and how we tackle that is a big knotty problem that we're not going to solve this evening. It's a long-running issue. That's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up there. Many thanks to all of our speakers and to everyone that's contributed questions and comments in the chat. And I say many thanks again to Megan and Ellen for helping set all this up. And a reminder that we are going to be looking at the European perspective in terms of the 2024 curlew breeding season in just under a month's time on the 13th of November, which I think will be equally fascinating. So let's close it there. Thanks everyone, and see you at the next event.